Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to the Mongolian steppe in the year 1171, to a world so cold and vast that the horizon itself feels like a kind of emptiness. We're following a boy named Temujin, 9 years old, watching his father's body grow stiff in the freezing wind. His father has just been poisoned by rival Tatars. His family has just been abandoned by their own clan. And you're standing there with him, feeling the first bite of a hunger that will last for years. This is the story of Genghis Khan, the riches he seized, the terror he unleashed, and the tomb that vanished like smoke. It's a story about survival, about turning betrayal into empire, and about a grave so secret that 8 centuries later, we still don't know where it is. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing that someone in Sao Paulo is drifting off at 2 a.m. while someone in Lisbon is just settling in at dawn. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the steppe in spring. The grass is pale green and endless. There are no trees, no mountains, just grass and sky, and somewhere far off, a line of horses moving slowly. You can hear the wind before you feel it. It smells like dust and animal sweat and something faintly metallic like old blood dried into leather. Temujin is thin. His clothes are too big. His mother, Holon, is gathering wild onions and roots near the riverbank, her hands cracked and bleeding. She was once the wife of a Khan. Now she digs in the mud for food. You watch Temujin's older half-brother, Begtur, sit by the fire and refuse to share a fish he caught. It's not a big fish, maybe the size of your hand, but it's food, and in this world, food is the only currency that matters. Temujin watches him eat it. He says nothing. 2 days later, you see Temujin and his full brother, Kasar, walk into the hills with their bows. When they come back, Begtur is not with them. Holon knows immediately what has happened. She screams at Temujin, calls him a monster. He stares at her with eyes that haven't learned to blink yet. He was 9 when his father died. He is maybe 11 now. He is already killed. Historians still argue whether this murder was justified by steppe custom or simply the act of a boy learning that mercy is a luxury he cannot afford. Either way, it sets a pattern. Betrayal will be answered. Always. You follow Temujin through the next few years. He's captured by a rival clan, the Thud, and locked in a wooden collar called a kang. It's heavy. It presses into his collarbones. He can't lie down. At night, they loosen it just enough that he doesn't die. During a feast, when the guards are drunk, he escapes. He hides in a freezing river, breathing through a gap in the reeds. A man named Sorkin Shira finds him and doesn't report him. Another rule learned. Loyalty exists, but it must be earned. You see him steal horses. You see him marry Borte, a girl promised to him years before in a quieter world. She brings a dowry, a black sable cloak, worth a fortune on the steppe. Temujin trades it for an alliance with Togril, a powerful Khan. This is the moment he stops being a scavenger and starts being a player. But then the Merkits come. They remember that Temujin's father once kidnapped Holon from their tribe. They want revenge. They raid his camp at dawn. Temujin escapes into the mountains. Borte does not. She is taken, along with several other women. You watch Temujin stand on a ridge, staring at the dust cloud where his wife has disappeared. He does not cry. He does not rage. He simply begins to plan. It takes months to gather allies. Togril helps. So does Jamuka, Temujin's childhood friend, his Anda, blood brother. Together, they crush the Merkits. Borte is recovered. She is pregnant. No one asks whose child it is. The boy, Joki, will grow up under a cloud of doubt, but Temujin claims him as his own. Another lesson, power can rewrite paternity. You notice something about Temujin now. He doesn't just fight. He remembers every slight, every betrayal, every moment of hunger. He is building something in his mind, a structure made of fear and loyalty and absolute control. He doesn't have an empire yet. He doesn't even have a clan. But he has a vision, and it's clearer than anything else on the steppe. Here's a strange historical fact. Temujin once hid inside a cart of wool for 3 days to escape an ambush. Imagine that. The future Genghis Khan, the man who would conquer more land than Rome ever held, crouched in the dark, breathing through wool, waiting for the footsteps to pass. History is made by people who know when to hide. And here's an academic debate that still simmers. Was Temujin a genius of military strategy from the beginning, or did he simply survive long enough to learn from better men? Some scholars say he invented nothing, that he borrowed Chinese siege tactics, Khwarezmian espionage, and Turkic horse archery. Others say his brilliance was in synthesis, in taking scattered ideas and forging them into a single, unstoppable system. You'll see that system soon enough. But for now, he's still just a man with a stolen horse and a wife who came back. The steppe is quiet tonight. The stars are so thick they look like frost. Somewhere, a wolf howls. Temujin listens to it for a long time. Then he turns and walks back to his tent. You follow him. You always do. He doesn't know it yet, but in 30 years, he will rule from Korea to the Caspian Sea. He will erase cities. He will rewrite the map. And when he dies, his grave will be hidden so well that it will become a ghost story. But tonight, he is just a man who survived. And that, for now, is enough. You're watching 2 boys on the frozen Onan River. They're maybe 11 years old. One is Temujin. The other is Jamuka. They're exchanging knuckle bones. Ankle bones from sheep, polished smooth, used for games and gambling across the steppe. Jamuka gives Temujin a knuckle bone made from brass. Temujin gives Jamuka one carved from horn. They prick their fingers with a knife. They mix their blood. They swear an oath. Anda, blood brothers. It's a sacred bond on the steppe, older than any Khan, older than any tribe. It means you share everything. Your horses, your food, your enemies, your life. If one dies, the other avenges him. If one is betrayed, the other burns the world down. You watch them smile at each other. They don't know yet that this oath will crack down the middle. That in 20 years, one will order the other's execution. That their friendship will become the fault line that splits the Mongol world in half. But right now, they're just boys, and the ice is thick enough to hold them. Years pass. You see Temujin grow into a young man, lean and hard, his face carved by wind and hunger. Jamuka becomes a leader too, charismatic and quick-witted, the kind of man people follow because he makes them feel seen. They fight together. They raid together. When Temujin's wife Borte is kidnapped by the Merkits, Jamuka rides with him to get her back. They crush the Merkits. They divide the spoils. Everything is as it should be. Then something shifts. Historians still argue whether the break was ideological or personal, whether it was about power structures or just 2 proud men who couldn't share the same sky. Here's what you see. After a successful raid, Jamuka suggests they camp separately. It will be better, he says, if those who tend horses camp near the mountains, and those who tend sheep camp near the rivers. It sounds practical. But Borte, Temujin's wife, hears something else. She tells Temujin, he's pushing you away. He wants distance. Temujin listens to her. That night, while Jamuka sleeps, Temujin packs up his tents and leaves. He takes several clans with him. People are choosing, and they're not all choosing Jamuka. This is the wound that never heals. You watch the steppe divide. Some clans follow Jamuka, who represents the old way. Tribal confederation, shared leadership, the idea that Khans are chosen by consensus. Others follow Temujin, who represents something newer and more terrifying. Absolute loyalty to a single leader, meritocracy over bloodline, unity through submission. It's not democracy versus tyranny. It's chaos versus order. And the steppe has been chaotic for a very long time. They meet in battle at Dallin Ball's hut in 1187. You stand on a hill and watch 2 armies collide. Horses scream. Arrows darken the sky. Jamuka wins. He captures several of Temujin's allies and does something that shocks even the steppe. He boils 70 prisoners alive in great iron cauldrons. It's not just cruelty. It's theater. He wants people to fear him the way they're starting to fear Temujin. But it backfires. The clans see it as excessive, dishonorable. Jamuka's support begins to erode. Here's a strange historical curiosity. Jamuka once claimed descent from a mythical blue-gray wolf, the same ancestor Temujin's clan claimed. They were rival brothers not just politically, but cosmically. Two men who believed they were destined to rule, standing in each other's way like twin suns. Imagine the weight of that. Imagine knowing your best friend believes he's the wolf, and so do you. Temujin doesn't boil his enemies. He recruits them. When a man from Jamuka's camp defects, Temujin asks him why. The man says, Jamuka is brilliant, but he's unpredictable. You're the same every time. We know what you'll do. Temujin nods. He gives the man a position. This is his genius. Consistency. Terror, yes. But predictable terror. You know what happens if you betray him. You know what happens if you serve him well. The rules are clear. You follow Temujin to 1206. He has spent 20 years consolidating power, absorbing clans, breaking rivals. He calls a great assembly, a Kurultai, on the banks of the Onan River. Every Khan, every chief, every leader who has submitted comes. They raise a white banner with 9 yak tails. They proclaim him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. He is no longer Temujin, the boy who hid in reeds. He is the storm itself. But Jamuka is still out there. For years, Jamuka runs. He gathers followers, loses them, gathers them again. He's a ghost on the steppe, a memory of the old world. Finally, in 1206, his own men betray him. They bind him and bring him to Genghis Khan. You watch the meeting. 2 old men now, gray in their beards, lines around their eyes. They look at each other for a long time. Jamuka speaks first. You won, he says. Kill me with honor. No blood on the ground. It's a request for death by breaking the spine, a traditional execution for nobility, one that doesn't spill blood. Genghis Khan agrees. Some chronicles say he wept. Others say his face was stone. You can't tell. What you can tell is this. He wraps Jamuka's body in white felt and buries him on a hill overlooking the Onan River, the place where they became blood brothers, the place where it all began. Here's the academic debate. Did Genghis Khan love Jamuka, or did he simply respect him as the only rival who ever truly challenged him? Some historians argue that Jamuka represented everything Genghis Khan had to destroy. The old tribal chaos, the system of shifting alliances, the world where loyalty was negotiable. Others say Jamuka was the one man Genghis Khan never wanted to kill, and that the execution haunted him for the rest of his life. Both can be true. History is full of men who loved what they destroyed. The steppe is quiet after Jamuka's death. You stand on that hill and look out at the endless grass. The wind is the same. The sky is the same. But something has changed. There are no more rivals. No more blood brothers. Just one Khan, and a world that will bow or burn. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnies. You turn and walk back toward the camp. Genghis Khan is sitting by a fire, staring into the flames. He doesn't look victorious. He looks tired. You wonder if he's thinking about a boy on a frozen river, exchanging knucklebones. You wonder if he remembers what it felt like to have a friend. You'll never know, and neither will anyone else. You're standing at the edge of the Kurultai in 1206, watching history fold in on itself and emerge as something new. There are thousands of people here, warriors, chiefs, shamans, families. The air smells like horse sweat, fermented mare's milk, and smoke from 100 cook fires. Everyone is waiting. Temujin steps forward. He's 44 years old now, though no one knows his exact birth date. His face is lined. His beard is going gray, but his eyes are clear, and when he speaks, the steppe goes silent. He is proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler. Not Khan of the Mongols, not Khan of a tribe, Khan of everything. The title is audacious, absurd even. He rules a collection of nomadic clans on a windswept plateau that most of the world has never heard of. But you can feel in the air, this is not a man who thinks small. He doesn't give a speech about glory or destiny. Instead, he announces a law code. It's called the Yasa, and it will govern the empire for generations. You listen as the rules are proclaimed. Some are predictable. Loyalty to the Khan is absolute. Desertion is punishable by death. Theft is forbidden. But others are strange, radical even. Religious tolerance is mandated. shamans, Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, all are protected. Women can own property. Merit matters more than blood. A shepherd who fights well can become a general. A prince who fails can lose everything. This is the revolution, and it's not romantic. It's bureaucratic. You watch Genghis Khan organize his army into units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Every man knows his place. Every commander is chosen for competence, not family name. It's meritocracy enforced by terror, and it works because everyone knows the alternative is chaos. The steppe has been chaotic for centuries. Endless feuds, shifting alliances, clans rising and falling like grass in the wind. Genghis Khan offers something new: order. Brutal, absolute, suffocating order. And people accept it because at least they know the rules. Here's a historical fact that often gets overlooked. Genghis Khan introduced a written script for the Mongol language, adapted from the Uyghur alphabet. Before this, Mongol was purely oral. After this, laws could be recorded, messages could be sent across vast distances, history could be written down. He understood that empires are built on information as much as violence. You need to know who owes you taxes, who has betrayed you, who is marching toward your border. Writing makes memory permanent. You follow him into the first campaigns. He doesn't go west yet. First, he consolidates the east. The Tangut Kingdom, the Jurchen Jin dynasty, the remnants of tribal holdouts. Everyone who could challenge him must be crushed or absorbed. You watch the pattern repeat. Envoys are sent, terms are offered, resistance is met with annihilation. It's not personal, it's policy. Here's an eccentric curiosity. Genghis Khan reportedly had a deep fear of dogs. Some chronicles say he was bitten as a child. Others say it was a spiritual aversion tied to shamanic beliefs about dogs guarding the underworld. Either way, dogs were not allowed in his presence. Imagine that. A man who would conquer half the world, terrified of a barking dog. History is full of these contradictions. The things that scare us rarely make sense. You're in a command tent now, watching Genghis Khan meet with his generals. They're an unusual group. Subutai, the brilliant strategist, is the son of a blacksmith. Jeeb, the master archer, once shot Genghis Khan's horse out from under him in battle, then surrendered and was given a command. Macaulay, the loyal enforcer, is a former slave. This is the inner circle, and none of them are princes. They're here because they're good at what they do, and what they do is win. The conversation is practical. They're planning a campaign against the Jin dynasty. Northern China, fortified cities, millions of people. The Mongols are nomads. They don't know how to siege cities. So Genghis Khan does what he always does. He learns. He conscripts Chinese engineers. He studies siege warfare. He adapts. By the time the Mongols reach the walls of Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, they have catapults, siege towers, and a terrifying willingness to wait. The city holds out for a year. Then it surrenders. The population is given a choice: serve or die. Most serve. You notice something about Genghis Khan's empire that sets it apart from others. He doesn't impose Mongol culture on the conquered. He doesn't care if you speak Mongol, or worship Mongol gods, or dress like a Mongol. He cares about three things: taxes, loyalty, and roads. Pay your tribute, don't rebel, and keep the trade routes open. Do that, and you can live however you want. Violate any of those three rules, and your city becomes a cautionary tale. Historians still argue whether this tolerance was pragmatic or principled, whether Genghis Khan genuinely believed in pluralism or simply realized that forcing conformity would spark endless revolts. The truth is probably both. He was a man shaped by survival, and survival teaches you that ideology is expensive. Better to let people keep their gods and take their gold. You're watching him age now. He's in his 50s, still riding, still campaigning. His sons are grown: Joki, Shagatai, Ogdi, Talyui. Each one commands armies. Each one hungers for power. You can see the future fracturing already, the way empires always do. But for now, Genghis Khan holds it together through sheer force of will. He's sitting in his tent one night, drinking arag, fermented mare's milk, slightly sour, mildly alcoholic. He's reading a report from a merchant who traveled the Silk Road. The merchant describes cities Genghis Khan has never seen: Samarkand, Bokhara, Baghdad. Places where gold flows like water, where libraries hold books in a dozen languages, where the world feels infinite and old. You watch his face. He's thinking. He's always thinking. Here's a fact that captures the scale of what he built. At its height, the Mongol Empire would cover 12 million square miles, roughly the size of Africa. It would stretch from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to the Indian Ocean. No empire before or since has controlled that much contiguous land. And it started here, in a tent on the steppe, with a man who refused to accept the world as it was. But that's still years away. Right now, in 1206, the empire is just beginning. The Mongols have unified. The Yasa is law. The army is ready. And Genghis Khan is looking west. You stand at the edge of the camp and watch the horizon. The sun is setting, turning the grass gold. Somewhere out there, beyond the steppe, beyond the mountains, are cities that don't know his name yet. Cities full of people living ordinary lives, baking bread, falling in love, arguing about taxes. They have no idea what's coming. You turn back toward the tent. Genghis Khan is still reading, still planning. The fire crackles, the wind hums, and the world, without knowing it, begins to hold its breath. You're riding with the Mongol army now, and the first thing you notice is the silence. Thousands of horses moving across the steppe, and all you hear is the rhythm of hooves, the creak of leather, the occasional snort of a horse. No one is talking. No one is singing. This is not a medieval army marching to war with banners and drums. This is a migration of predators. Each warrior has 3 or 4 horses. They rotate them throughout the day, keeping the animals fresh. You watch a rider switch mounts without stopping. He simply slides from one horse to another while both are moving. It looks effortless. It's not. These men have been riding since they could walk. The horse is not a vehicle. It's an extension of their body. You notice their equipment. Composite bows, made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, curved and powerful. They can shoot accurately from horseback at full gallop. Each rider carries 60 arrows in a quiver. They wear leather armor, sometimes reinforced with metal plates, but never so heavy that it slows them down. Speed is everything. A Mongol army can cover 70 miles in a day. A European army might manage 15. Here's a historical fact that changed warfare forever. The Mongols pioneered the use of a sophisticated relay system called the Yam. Stations were set up every 20 to 30 miles across the empire, with fresh horses and riders waiting. Messages could travel 500 miles in a single day. A medieval European courier would need a week to cover the same distance. Information is power, and the Mongols moved information faster than anyone else in the world. You're watching them prepare for battle now. There's no dramatic speech, no prayer to the gods, just quiet coordination. The commanders signal with flags and whistles. The army splits into units, each one knowing exactly where to go. You see the standard formation, a center line and 2 wings that will curve around the enemy like a bow. It's simple, devastatingly simple. The enemy appears on the horizon. Let's say it's a Persian army, cavalry, infantry, confident in their numbers. They outnumber the Mongols 2 to 1. The Mongols charge. Then, just as the armies are about to meet, the Mongols turn and retreat. The Persians think they've won. They break formation and chase. This is the feigned retreat, and it's a trap older than empires. But the Mongols have perfected it. They retreat for miles, leading the enemy farther from their supply lines, stretching their formation thinner. Then, at a signal, the Mongol wings wheel around. Suddenly, the pursuers are surrounded. Arrows rain down from every direction. The Persians realize too late that they're not chasing a fleeing army. They're inside a closing fist. You watch it happen. It's not glorious. It's mechanical, efficient. The Mongols don't fight with rage or honor. They fight with geometry. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. The Mongols sometimes used prisoners as human shields during sieges, forcing captured civilians to march ahead of their troops and fill in moats. It's horrifying, And it's also strategic. The defenders on the walls had to choose between killing their own people or letting the Mongols advance. Most of the time, they hesitated. Hesitation is death in war. You're to siege now. The city is Samarkand, one of the jewels of the Silk Road. The Mongols arrive and set up camp. They don't immediately attack. Instead, they send engineers to divert the river that supplies the city's water. They build siege towers. They wait. Historians still argue whether the Mongols invented psychological warfare or simply perfected it. Before attacking a city, they would send spies to spread rumors about Mongol atrocities, stories of cities burned to ash, population slaughtered. Some of these stories were true. Many were exaggerated. It didn't matter. Fear is a weapon, and the Mongols wielded it with precision. Samarkand surrenders. The gates open. Genghis Khan rides in, and you follow. The city is magnificent. Blue-tiled mosques, bustling markets, libraries filled with manuscripts. Genghis Khan gives an order. Artisans, scholars, and engineers are to be spared and sent back to Mongolia. Everyone else must pay a ransom. Those who can't pay are enslaved or killed. It's not cruelty for its own sake. It's extraction. You notice something strange. Genghis Khan meets with the city's imams and Buddhist monks. He asks them about their beliefs. He listens. Then he issues a decree. All religions are protected under Mongol law. Temples and mosques are tax-exempt. Some historians argue this was genuine tolerance. Others say it was purely strategic. Religious conflict destabilizes empires. Both can be true. You're back with the army now, moving west. They're heading toward the Khwarezmian Empire, a vast Muslim state that made the mistake of killing Mongol envoys. Here's a rule on the steppe. You don't kill ambassadors. The Khwarezmian Shah killed them anyway. Genghis Khan's response was not immediate. He waited. He planned. Then he unleashed an invasion so thorough that the Khwarezmian Empire ceased to exist within 2 years. You watch cities fall one after another. Bokhara, Samarkand, Urgench. The pattern is always the same. Surrender and live under Mongol rule, or resist and be annihilated. Most cities surrender. A few don't. You're sitting in a command tent watching Subutai, Genghis Khan's greatest general, plan a campaign. He's using maps that show terrain features, supply routes, enemy positions. He's coordinating attacks across thousands of miles. This is staff work, logistics, intelligence gathering. It's boring. It's also why the Mongols won. Here's a fact that still astonishes military historians. In 1241, Subutai commanded a campaign in Europe where Mongol armies defeated Polish and Hungarian forces in battles fought on the same day, 500 miles apart, both part of a coordinated plan. No European army could do this. You watch the sun set over the steppe. The army is camped for the night. Horses grazing, men eating dried meat and yogurt. There are no campfires, too visible. Just darkness and stars, and the quiet breathing of 10,000 men who know exactly what they're doing. Somewhere in that darkness, Genghis Khan is planning the next campaign. The machine is running, and it won't stop until there's nothing left to conquer, or until he dies. You're standing outside the walls of Nishaper in 1221, watching smoke rise from cook fires inside the city. The walls are thick, limestone and mud brick, 30 feet high. The gates are barred. The defenders are confident. They've heard the rumors about the Mongols, but rumors are just stories. This city has stood for centuries. It will stand for centuries more. They don't know yet that they've already made their choice. And it was the wrong one. Here's what happened. A Mongol caravan arrived months ago, merchants carrying silk and silver, protected by diplomatic immunity. The governor of Nishaper, acting on orders from the Khwarezmian Shah, arrested them as spies. Then he executed them, all of them, including Genghis Khan's son-in-law, a man named Takuchur. You watch Genghis Khan receive the news. He doesn't rage. He doesn't weep. He simply gives an order. Nishaper will be erased. Not conquered. Not occupied. Erased. The siege begins. Mongol engineers, many of them Chinese, conscripted from previous campaigns, construct siege towers and catapults. They dig tunnels under the walls. They divert the city's water supply. The defenders hold out for weeks. raining arrows and boiling oil on anyone who approaches the walls. Then the walls crack. The Mongols pour through. What happens next is methodical. The population is divided into groups. Artisans and skilled workers are separated and sent east. Everyone else is killed. Not in battle. Not in the heat of the moment. Systematically. Building by building. Street by street. Historians estimate between 700,000 and 1.7 million people died, though those numbers are likely exaggerated by chroniclers who wanted to emphasize Mongol brutality. The real number was probably closer to 100,000. Still, that's everyone. Every man, woman, child. Even the animals. You walk through the ruins a week later. The silence is absolute. No dogs barking. No birds singing. Just wind moving through empty doorways. This is what happens when you kill a Mongol ambassador. But here's the thing most people miss. Nishaper was the exception, not the rule. For every city that resisted and was destroyed, dozens surrendered and survived. You're in Bokhara now, a few months earlier. The Mongols arrive. The city elders meet to discuss their options. Resist or surrender. They choose surrender. Genghis Khan enters the city on horseback. He rides to the central mosque, dismounts, and walks inside. The imam is terrified, expecting execution or desecration. Instead, Genghis Khan asks about the building. "Is this the palace of God?" he asks. The imam explains it's a mosque, a place of worship. Genghis Khan nods. He climbs to the pulpit and addresses the crowd. "I'm the punishment of God," he says. "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." It's theater. Pure, calculated theater. He's not claiming to be divine. He's claiming to be inevitable. The message is clear. Surrender and you'll be taxed but spared. Resist and you'll be erased. Most cities choose surrender. Here's an academic debate that still simmers. Were the Mongol massacres strategic terrorism or genuine expressions of rage? Some historians argue that the killings were carefully calibrated. Destroy one city completely, and the next 10 surrender without a fight. Others argue that Genghis Khan had a genuine code of honor about ambassadors, and that Nishaper's destruction was personal revenge, not policy. The answer is probably both. Genghis Khan was pragmatic enough to use terror as a tool, but he was also human enough to want vengeance for his son-in-law's murder. You're in Samarkand now, another jewel of the Silk Road. The city surrenders after a brief siege. The population is assembled in the main square. Genghis Khan's officials conduct a census, recording names, professions, and wealth. Skilled workers, engineers, weavers, scribes, doctors are given papers and told to prepare for relocation to Mongolia. Wealthy merchants are ransomed. Everyone else is taxed and left alone. The city continues functioning, just under new management. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. The Mongols conducted some of the earliest systematic censuses in history. They needed to know exactly how many people lived in each conquered territory, what resources were available, and who could pay taxes. This information was recorded on scrolls and transported back to the Mongol capital at Karakorum. It was bureaucracy on a scale that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. Conquest wasn't just about swords. It was about spreadsheets. You notice something about the pattern of destruction and preservation. Cities on major trade routes, like Samarkand and Bokhara, are usually spared if they surrender. Cities in strategic locations, mountain passes, river crossings, are occupied and garrisoned. Cities that resist, especially if they kill Mongol envoys or break agreements, are destroyed so completely that sometimes even their names are forgotten. You're watching a group of Mongol administrators now, Chinese and Persian bureaucrats who've been absorbed into the empire. They're assessing the tax base of a newly conquered province. They're calculating how much grain, silver, and horses the region can provide annually. They're establishing courts, appointing governors, setting up the yam relay stations. This is what empire looks like up close. It's not dramatic. It's tedious, but works. Within a few years, trade is flowing again along the Silk Road. Merchants who fled during the invasion are returning. Markets reopen. The Mongols take their cut, usually around 10% of all goods, but they also provide something valuable: security. The roads are safe. Bandits are rare because the penalty for robbery is death. A merchant can travel from Beijing to Baghdad with relative safety, something that was almost impossible before the Mongol conquest. Here's a fact that reshapes how we think about the Mongol Empire. By some estimates, the Mongol invasions killed between 10 and 40 million people, roughly 5 to 11% of the world's population at the time. It was one of the deadliest events in human history. But the deaths were concentrated. Most regions that surrendered experienced minimal casualties. The terror was targeted, designed to make resistance unthinkable. You're standing in a city that chose correctly. You don't know its name because it's not famous. It's just a medium-sized trading town somewhere in Central Asia. When the Mongol scouts arrived, the city elders opened the gates immediately. They provided food, horses, and guides. They paid tribute. The Mongol army passed through, spent a few days resting, and moved on. Life continued. No one wrote poems about this city. No chroniclers recorded its brave stand or tragic fall. It simply survived. And survival, in the age of Genghis Khan, was the greatest victory imaginable. You watch the sun set over the walls. The city is intact. People are walking home from the market. Children are playing in the streets. It looks ordinary, peaceful even, but everyone here knows the truth. They chose wisely, and every day they wake up in their own beds is a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is surrender. You're standing inside a treasure tent somewhere on the Mongolian steppe. It's larger than most yurts, reinforced with extra poles and guarded day and night. The smell hits you first: silk, leather, incense, old paper, metal. This is where the empire's wealth flows, and it flows constantly. You see bolts of Chinese silk stacked to the ceiling, each one worth more than a horse. There are Persian carpets rolled tight, their patterns so intricate they seem to move in the lamplight. Gold coins from a dozen mints, stamped with faces of dead emperors. Silver ingots from Central Asian mines. Jade carvings. Ivory tusks. A jeweled dagger that once belonged to the Shah of Khwarezm. It all ends up here. But the most valuable items aren't the ones that glitter. You notice a corner filled with manuscripts, Arabic texts on astronomy, Chinese medical treatises, Persian poetry, Buddhist sutras. These are the books that survived the conquests, carried here by scholars who were spared because Genghis Khan understood something crucial. Knowledge has value. A goldsmith can make you rich. A scholar can make you powerful. Here's a historical fact that reshapes our understanding of the Mongol Empire. They were voracious collectors of expertise. When they conquered a city, they didn't just loot its treasury. They inventoried its intellectual resources. Engineers who understood hydraulics, doctors who knew surgery, astronomers who could predict eclipses, translators who spoke 6 languages. All of them were given a choice: come work for the Khan or die with your city. Most chose to work. You watch a captured Chinese engineer explaining siege warfare to Mongol commanders using diagrams drawn in sand. He's teaching them about counterweights and trajectory angles. They're listening intently, asking questions. This is how the Mongols learned to conquer walled cities. They kidnapped the people who built them. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. Among the treasures brought back from Persia were several hundred parrots. Genghis Khan reportedly found them fascinating. Birds that could mimic human speech seemed almost magical. The parrots were kept in a special enclosure near the Khan's tent. Most of them died during the first Mongolian winter. The ones that survived became prized gifts worth more than gold. Imagine that, a parrot as diplomatic currency, squawking Persian phrases on the frozen steppe. You're watching the distribution of plunder now. It's not random. Everything is recorded, weighed, and divided according to rank and merit. Genghis Khan takes his share first, usually 20% of everything. Then his family. Then his generals, weighted by performance in the last campaign. Then the common soldiers. Even the lowest archer gets something. This is crucial. The empire runs on incentive. Every man knows that victory means wealth, and loyalty means survival. But here's where it gets interesting. Much of the wealth doesn't stay with individuals. It flows back into the empire's infrastructure. The yam relay stations need horses, food, and fresh riders. The army needs weapons, armor, and supplies. Conquered territories need administrators and governors. The plunder is both reward and investment. It's capitalism before capitalism had a name. You notice a group of merchants being interviewed by Mongol officials. These are the backbone of the empire's intelligence network. Merchants travel everywhere, see everything, hear every rumor. The Mongols give them tax exemptions and protection in exchange for information. Where are the roads? How well defended are the cities? What's the price of grain? Who's fighting whom? The merchants become spies without even realizing it, and the Mongols map the world through their eyes. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire was primarily extractive or genuinely interested in development. On one hand, they conquered to plunder. On the other hand, they invested heavily in roads, bridges, and communication networks that made trade more efficient. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol rule because the Mongols wanted their cut of every transaction. Stability was profitable. You're in the tent of a captured Persian administrator now. He's been given a position managing tax collection in Central Asia. He speaks 5 languages, understands local customs, and knows which families have hidden wealth. The Mongols don't replace local governments. They absorb them. If you were useful before the conquest, you're probably still useful after, just with new masters. Here's a fact that still surprises historians. The Mongol Empire had a sophisticated paper currency system, adopted from China. By the mid-13th century, you could carry paper notes issued by the Khan that were accepted from Beijing to Baghdad. Refuse to accept them, and you'd be executed. It was fiat currency enforced by terror, and it worked. The Mongols understood that money is just collective belief backed by violence. You watch a caravan prepare to leave for Karakorum, the Mongol capital. It's loaded with tribute from a dozen conquered regions: silk from China, glassware from Syria, furs from Russia, spices from India. The caravan master checks his manifest against the official records. Everything is accounted for. Everything has a destination. This isn't random looting. It's systematic extraction. But you also notice something else in the treasure tent. There are religious objects, Christian relics, Buddhist statues, Islamic prayer rugs, Taoist talismans. They're not being melted down or destroyed. They're being preserved, cataloged, treated with a kind of distant respect. Genghis Khan's religious tolerance wasn't just political calculation. It was also intellectual curiosity. He wanted to understand what made people believe, what gave them courage, what they would die for. You walk outside as the sun sets. The treasure tent glows from within, lamplight filtering through felt walls. Guards stand motionless at the entrance. Somewhere in the distance, horses whinny. The steppe stretches endlessly in every direction. All this wealth, silk and silver and sacred texts, it's flowing toward Mongolia, a place that was nothing 20 years ago. Just scattered clans on a frozen plateau. Now it's the center of the world's largest empire. And every caravan that arrives makes it more real, more permanent. But here's the question that haunts every empire. What happens when there's nothing left to conquer? When every city has surrendered, every treasure has been claimed, every scholar has been conscripted, what happens when a machine runs out of fuel? You don't know the answer yet. Neither does Genghis Khan. But you can feel it in the air like the first cold wind of autumn. The plunder is infinite until suddenly it's not. You're watching Genghis Khan in 1219, and something has changed. He's in his late 50s now, though no one knows exactly. The steppe doesn't keep careful records of birth dates. His hair is gray. His hands shake slightly in the cold. He still rides, still commands, still wins. But you can see it in his eyes. He's thinking about the end. He's just returned from crushing the Khwarezmian Empire. The campaign was brutal and complete. Cities fell like dominoes. But on the way back, something happened that no amount of military genius could prevent. He fell from his horse during a hunt. It wasn't dramatic, just a bad landing, a jarring impact. He was injured, badly enough that he had to rest for weeks. For a man who built an empire on horseback, it was a preview of mortality. You're in his tent now. He's meeting with shamans, Taoist monks, Buddhist lamas, Muslim scholars, Christian priests. Anyone who claims to know anything about death. about what comes after, about whether there's a way to delay the inevitable. He's not seeking spiritual comfort. He's seeking information, data, a solution. Here's a historical fact that captures his desperation. In 1219, Genghis Khan heard about a Taoist monk named Qiu Chuji who reportedly knew the secret of immortality. The monk was in China, over 1,000 miles away. Genghis Khan sent envoys with a personal invitation, practically begging the monk to come. It took Qiu Chuji 2 years to make the journey. He was in his 70s, traveling through war zones and mountain passes. When he finally arrived in 1221, Genghis Khan gave him a private audience. You're there when they meet. The tent is quiet. Guards stand outside. Genghis Khan asked the question directly. Do you have the medicine of immortality? Qiu Chuji looks at him for a long moment. Then he says, I have means of protecting life, but no elixir of immortality. It's the truth, and it's devastating. The monk goes on to talk about moderation, about spiritual cultivation, about accepting the natural order. Genghis Khan listens. He doesn't execute the monk for disappointing him. He gives him honors, gifts, and protection. But you can see the defeat in his eyes. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. Genghis Khan became obsessed with alchemy in his final years. He had Chinese alchemists trying to create elixirs from mercury, sulfur, and various minerals. Some of these concoctions were almost certainly toxic. There's historical speculation that his declining health in his last years might have been partially due to slow mercury poisoning from drinking immortality tonics. The man who conquered empires may have been slowly killing himself in an attempt to live forever. You watch him age in real time now. The campaigns continue. He's planning an assault on the Tangut kingdom, a loose end that needs tying up. But he's different, more irritable, more withdrawn. He spends hours alone, reading reports, staring at maps. Sometimes he just sits and watches the horizon. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan's fear of death was personal or political. Personally, he was facing the universal human terror of non-existence. Politically, he had a massive problem: succession. He had 4 legitimate sons, each commanding their own armies, each with ambitions. If he died without clear instructions, the empire would fracture immediately. Civil war was inevitable. So his fear of death wasn't just about losing his life. It was about losing everything he'd built. You're present at a family meeting in 1222. Genghis Khan has gathered his sons and close advisors. He's trying to organize the succession. Joki, the eldest, is suspected of being illegitimate. Remember Borte's kidnapping all those years ago. The doubt has never gone away. Chagatai, the second son, openly despises Joki. They nearly came to blows once in front of their father. Ogdi, the third son, is diplomatic, intelligent, but lacks his father's ruthlessness. Taoyui, the youngest, is brilliant but too loyal to challenge his brothers. Genghis Khan chooses Ogdi. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the one most likely to keep the empire together. It's a pragmatic choice, and it works for a while. But you can see the future cracking already. These men are wolves. They'll cooperate only as long as there's someone strong enough to force them. You notice Genghis Khan touching his side sometimes, wincing. That fall from the horse never really healed. There's internal damage, chronic pain. He drinks Arag to dull it, but it's getting worse. He's still planning campaigns, still issuing orders, but there's a fragility now that wasn't there before. Here's a fact that reveals his state of mind. In his final years, Genghis Khan ordered that anyone who mentioned death in his presence should be immediately removed. Not killed, just removed. He couldn't bear to hear the word. The man who had caused millions of deaths couldn't face his own. You're riding with the army toward the Tangut kingdom in 1227. It's summer, brutally hot. Genghis Khan is ill, running a fever. His advisors beg him to turn back, to rest, to recover. He refuses. This campaign has become personal. The Tanguts defied him once, and he swore to annihilate them. He's determined to see it through. You watch him grow weaker. The fever doesn't break. He can barely sit upright on his horse. Finally, in August 1227, he calls his generals to his tent. He gives final instructions. Finish the Tangut campaign. Keep his death secret until the succession is secured. Bury him without markers. Then he dictates one last order. The Tangut royal family should be exterminated. Every member. No exceptions. It's not strategy. It's rage. The rage of a dying man who realizes that all his power, all his conquests, all his wealth can't buy him one more day. He dies on August 18th, 1227, in a tent somewhere in Tangut territory. You're not there. No one is, except maybe a single servant. The details are lost to history. Some chronicles say it was the fever. Some say it was complications from that old fall. Some whisper about assassination, though there's no evidence. The truth is simpler and more mundane. He was an old man, far from home, sick and exhausted. And one night, he just stopped breathing. The man who tried to conquer death died like everyone else. Quietly. Alone. With all his empire unable to save him. You're with the army in Tangut territory, August 1227, and something is wrong. The campaign is going well. Cities are falling. Resistance is crumbling. But there's a strange quiet in the command structure. Orders are still being issued in Genghis Khan's name, but no one has seen him in days. His tent is guarded more heavily than usual. Visitors are turned away. Even his sons are kept at a distance. Here's what you don't know yet, but what a handful of people inside that tent know. Genghis Khan is dead. He died 3 days ago, and his death is the most closely guarded secret in the empire. You watch the army continue its work. The Tangut capital is under siege. The royal family is negotiating surrender. Everything proceeds normally because everyone believes the Khan is still alive, still watching, still capable of ordering executions. The illusion of his presence is as powerful as the reality ever was. Inside the tent, a small group is making decisions that will shape the next century. The body must be transported back to Mongolia. The succession must be secured before anyone knows. The Tangut campaign must be finished exactly as Genghis Khan ordered. Most importantly, no one outside this tent can know the truth. Not yet. Here's a historical fact that still chills historians. According to multiple chronicles, everyone who witnessed Genghis Khan's funeral procession was killed. The Mongol honor guard transporting his body from Tangut territory back to Mongolia reportedly murdered every single person they encountered along the route. Shepherds, travelers, entire villages. Some estimates put the number at several thousand deaths. The location of his burial had to remain absolutely secret, and dead witnesses tell no tales. You're not on that funeral procession. You wouldn't survive if you were. But you hear about it later in whispers. The procession traveled for weeks, moving through remote valleys and mountain passes. They chose routes deliberately away from settlements. When they couldn't avoid people, they killed them. Men, women, children. No exceptions. It wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was security protocol taken to its absolute extreme. Historians still argue whether these massacre accounts are exaggerated. Some say the numbers are inflated by later chroniclers who wanted to emphasize Mongol ruthlessness. Others point out that the Mongols had successfully hidden Genghis Khan's burial site for 8 centuries, which suggests extraordinary measures were taken. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Some witnesses were definitely killed, but perhaps not everyone along every route. You're back in Mongolia now, months after the death. The official announcement has finally been made. Genghis Khan died, completing his final campaign, as he would have wanted. His son Ogdi has been proclaimed his successor, as planned. The empire continues. But there's a question on everyone's mind. Where is he buried? The answer is, no one knows. And that's exactly how it was planned. You hear the rumors that spread across the steppe. Some say he's buried on Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain where he hid as a young man fleeing enemies. Others say he's in the Kenai Mountains, near the headwaters of the Onan River. Some claim his burial chamber is filled with treasures, gold, weapons, the spoils of 1,000 conquests. Others say he was buried simply, as a steppe warrior, with just his horse and bow. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. One tradition says that 1,000 horses were driven over Genghis Khan's grave to trample the earth flat and erase all traces. Another says that a river was diverted to flow over the burial site, then redirected back to its original course, leaving the grave underwater and unmarked. Yet another claims that trees were planted over the grave and the surrounding area declared forbidden, a sacred grove that no one could enter on pain of death. All these might be true. None of them might be true. That's the genius of the secrecy. So many contradictory stories that the truth becomes impossible to find. You're watching the political aftermath now. OGDI is Khan, but he's not his father. He's more diplomatic, more willing to delegate, more interested in building than destroying. He establishes a permanent capital at Karakoram. He continues the Western campaigns. He tries to hold his brothers together. It works mostly, but you can feel the empire changing. It's no longer one man's vision. It's becoming an institution. The Tangut kingdom, as Genghis Khan ordered, is annihilated. The royal family is executed. The population is scattered. The kingdom ceases to exist as a political entity. It's the last act of Genghis Khan's will, carried out after his death. Even from the grave, he's still issuing orders. You notice something about how people talk about Genghis Khan now that he's dead. He's already becoming mythical. Stories are being exaggerated, cleaned up, given narrative shape. The starving boy who ate wild onions becomes the destined conqueror. The man who failed to find immortality becomes the eternal Khan. History is being written, and it's being written by the victors. Here's a fact that captures the scale of what he left behind. When Genghis Khan died, the Mongol Empire controlled roughly 12 million square miles of territory. It would continue expanding for another 50 years under his descendants, eventually becoming the largest contiguous land empire in human history. His grandsons would conquer Russia, invade Poland and Hungary, destroy Baghdad, and establish the Yuan dynasty in China. Everything that came after started with him. But right now, in 1227, none of that has happened yet. Right now, he's just a body in an unmarked grave somewhere on the Mongolian steppe. The location known only to a handful of people, all of whom are sworn to secrecy. Most of whom will probably be killed to ensure that secrecy. You stand on a hillside in the Kenai Mountains. It's autumn. The grass is golden. The sky is impossibly blue. Somewhere beneath this landscape, maybe within a few miles of where you're standing, is the most famous grave that no one has ever found. You think about the boy who survived assassination, starvation, slavery, and war. The man who built an empire from nothing. The Khan who tried to conquer death and failed. He's down there somewhere, waiting, silent, exactly as he planned. You're standing in the Kenai Mountains in 2003, watching a team of archaeologists set up ground-penetrating radar equipment. They're the latest in a long line of treasure hunters, historians, and obsessives who believe they can find what 8 centuries of searching has failed to locate. The tomb of Genghis Khan. They won't find it, but that won't stop them from trying. Here's a historical fact that captures the scale of this mystery. Over the past 800 years, there have been literally hundreds of expeditions searching for Genghis Khan's tomb. Governments, universities, treasure hunters, archaeologists, even satellite imaging companies have tried. They've used ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, drone surveys, and old-fashioned excavation. No one has found anything definitive. You watch a Soviet archaeological team in the 1950s dig for weeks in the Kenai Mountains. They find nothing. This pattern will repeat dozens of times over the next century. Confident expeditions, careful excavations, advanced technology. Nothing. The grave remains hidden. Here's why it's so hard. The Mongols left no markers, no monuments, no inscriptions. The location was kept secret from everyone except a handful of people who are now dead. The landscape has changed over 8 centuries. Rivers shift course, forests grow and die, hills erode. And the grave might not be elaborate at all. It could be a simple pit, covered with earth, indistinguishable from the surrounding steppe. You notice persistent rumors. Soviet archaeologists supposedly discovered the site in the 1970s, but were ordered by Moscow to abandon the excavation for political reasons. No evidence supports this, but it's a good story. Stories like this multiply around mysteries. Here's a modern fact. In the early 2000s, a University of Chicago professor led an archaeological survey using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar in the Kenai Mountains. They identified several promising anomalies, unusual earth formations, possible buried structures. But Mongolian law forbids excavation in the area. The mountains are considered sacred. Even if someone found the grave, they legally couldn't dig it up. You're back in the 13th century now, watching the legends grow. Every generation adds new details. Some say his grave is protected by curses. Anyone who disturbs it will die. Others say it's guarded by mountain spirits. Still others claim the location was encoded in secret poems or entrusted to guardians who passed the knowledge down through generations. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. In the 1990s, a Japanese-Mongolian expedition spent millions of dollars searching for the tomb using cutting-edge technology. They found dozens of Mongol-era graves, ancient settlements, fascinating archaeological sites. But not the tomb. The grave has defeated every attempt to find it, from medieval treasure hunters to modern archaeologists with satellite imagery. You notice how quickly the myth-making began. Barely a year after Genghis Khan's death, contradictory stories circulated. He died in battle. No, he died in his sleep. He was poisoned. He was injured. He was killed by a Tangut princess. Every culture that encountered the Mongols has its own version of his death, and none of them quite agree. Here's what historians know for certain. Genghis Khan died in August 1227, probably from illness or injury complications, somewhere in what is now northwest China. Everything else is speculation, rumor, and propaganda. You're listening to an old soldier tell stories now, years after the funeral. He claims he was part of the honor guard. He's drunk on arak, careful about what he says. We traveled only at night. We avoided all roads. When we saw smoke from a cooking fire, we rode toward it. He stops talking, stares into his cup. You don't ask him to continue. You already know what happened to the people at those fires. The Mongolian government doesn't help modern searches. The area around Burkhan Khaldun is legally protected, culturally sacred, and deliberately kept off-limits to archaeological excavation. Even if someone found the grave, they might not be allowed to excavate it. The secrecy Genghis Khan demanded in death is still being enforced by his descendants' homeland. You're sitting with an old Mongolian herder now, centuries after the burial. He's telling you what his grandfather told him. The Khan is in the mountains, he says. But the mountains don't want to be found. It's not a metaphor. It's a statement of fact. The land itself is complicit in the secret. Here's an academic debate that defines modern archaeology. Is it ethical to search for Genghis Khan's tomb? Some scholars argue it's a historical imperative. Understanding his burial could unlock enormous insights into Mongol culture. Others argue that disturbing the grave would violate Mongol cultural values and religious beliefs. The Mongolian government has officially discouraged searches, calling the area sacred. Here's a fact that complicates everything. The Mongols traditionally didn't build elaborate tombs. They buried their dead simply, often in unmarked graves. The idea that Genghis Khan's tomb is filled with gold and treasures might be complete fiction. He might be in a simple grave with nothing but his bow and a horse. Or he might have been cremated, or sealed in a cave. No one knows. You're standing on Burkhan Khaldun now, the sacred mountain. It's forbidden territory, protected by law and tradition. The forests are thick. The valleys are remote. Somewhere in this landscape, maybe, is a grave that has remained hidden for 8 centuries. Or maybe it's somewhere else entirely. Maybe the tomb was destroyed by floods. Maybe it was looted centuries ago. Maybe it never existed at all. The mystery has become its own kind of immortality. Genghis Khan wanted to live forever. He failed, but in failing, he achieved something stranger. He became impossible to kill completely. You can't conquer what you can't find. You can't destroy what you can't locate. His grave is everywhere and nowhere. And maybe that's exactly what he wanted. You're standing at the end now, looking back across 8 centuries. Genghis Khan has been dead longer than most empires have existed. The Mongol Empire itself fractured within a few generations, splitting into khanates that fought each other as fiercely as they once fought the world. But something strange happened. The man refused to disappear. Here's a historical fact that still astonishes geneticists. A 2003 study found that approximately 16 million men alive today, roughly 0.5% of the male population of the world, carry a Y chromosome sequence that traces back to Mongolia around 1,000 years ago. The researchers believe this genetic signature likely comes from Genghis Khan and his close male relatives. He didn't conquer death, but he did something almost as strange. He became biology itself, written into the DNA of millions. You watch his empire fragment. His grandson Kublai Khan establishes the Yuan dynasty in China. Another grandson, Hulagu, destroys Baghdad and establishes the Ilkhanate in Persia. The Golden Horde rules Russia. The Chagatai Khanate controls Central Asia. They're all Mongols, all descendants of Genghis Khan, and they spend the next century fighting each other for dominance. But even as the political empire crumbles, something else happens. The roads remain. The Yam relay system, adapted and maintained, becomes the foundation for trade routes that will last for centuries. The Silk Road flourishes under the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, making it safer to travel from Europe to China than it had been in centuries. Ideas flow with the goods. Paper and gunpowder travel west. Persian astronomy travels east. The world becomes smaller because Genghis Khan made it so. Here's an eccentric historical curiosity. Marco Polo's famous journey to China was only possible because of the infrastructure Genghis Khan built. The roads, the relay stations, the tolerance for foreign travelers, all of it was Mongol innovation. Polo traveled through a world that Genghis Khan had reshaped, even though he arrived decades after the Khan's death. The ghost of empire made his journey possible. You notice how different cultures remember him differently. In China, he's a barbarian destroyer who ended the Song dynasty. In Russia, he's the beginning of centuries of foreign domination. In Persia, he's the apocalypse, the end of the Islamic Golden Age, the destroyer of Baghdad's libraries. But in Mongolia, he's the founding father, the man who united warring clans into a nation. Same man, for completely different memories. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan was a visionary or a monster, a unifier or a destroyer. The answer, frustratingly, is yes. He killed millions. He also established religious tolerance, meritocracy, and legal codes that protected women's property rights. He destroyed civilizations. He also connected them. He was both the disease and the cure, depending on where you stood. You're in modern Mongolia now, watching his rehabilitation. For decades, under Soviet rule, mentioning Genghis Khan was discouraged. He represented nationalism, something the Soviets wanted to suppress. But after independence in 1990, he became the symbol of Mongolian identity. His face is on the currency. His statue dominates the capital. He's been transformed from historical figure into national myth. Here's a fact about his modern legacy. The largest equestrian statue in the world is of Genghis Khan, built in Mongolia in 2008. It's 130 feet tall, made of stainless steel, and depicts him on horseback looking east toward his birthplace. Tourists can stand on the horse's head and look out over the steppe. The boy who once hid in reeds, starving and hunted, is now a monument that can be seen for miles. You watch how his story gets told and retold. Every generation reshapes him. Medieval chroniclers made him God's punishment for sin. Enlightenment historians made him a barbarian who set civilization back centuries. Romantic writers made him a noble savage. Modern historians make him a complex figure, brutal but brilliant, destructive but transformative. He contains multitudes because we project multitudes onto him. Here's an academic debate that will never be resolved. Did the Mongol conquests accelerate or retard human progress? They killed millions and destroyed irreplaceable cultural treasures, like the libraries of Baghdad. But they also connected East and West, facilitated trade and cultural exchange, and established administrative systems that influenced governance for centuries. The Black Death spread along Mongol trade routes, killing a third of Europe. But so did paper, gunpowder, and printing technology. He's simultaneously history's greatest catastrophe and one of its most important connectors. You're standing on the steppe now, in the present day. The wind is the same wind that blew through Genghis Khan's childhood. The grass is the same grass his horses ate. The sky is the same impossible blue. But everything else has changed. The nomadic life is disappearing. The yurts have electricity. The herders have smartphones. Mongolia is a democracy now, a small nation caught between Russia and China, no longer the center of anything. But the memory persists. Genghis Khan is more famous now than he was in his lifetime. More books have been written about him in the last 50 years than in the previous 7 centuries combined. He's in movies, video games, novels, academic conferences. His name is synonymous with conquest, with unstoppable force, with the idea that one person can change the world. You think about that unmarked grave somewhere in these mountains. The body has long since returned to dust. The treasures, if there were any, are buried under 8 centuries of earth and forest. But the ghost, the idea of Genghis Khan, is more alive than most living people. He wanted immortality. He searched for it desperately in his final years, summoning monks and alchemists, drinking toxic elixirs, hoping to cheat death. He failed, but in failing, he achieved something stranger. He became a story that can't die, a name that echoes across centuries, a ghost that conquered not empires but memory itself. The sun is setting over the steppe now. The light is golden, stretching long shadows across the grass. Somewhere beneath this landscape is a grave no one has found. And standing here, you realize that maybe it doesn't matter. The body is gone. The empire is gone. The treasures are gone. But the ghost remains. And ghosts, unlike empires, can last forever. The wind picks up, moving through the grass like a whisper. You close your eyes and listen. And for just a moment, you can almost hear the sound of 10,000 horses moving across the steppe, heading west, always west, towards cities that don't know they're about to fall. Then the moment passes. The wind quiets. The steppe is empty again, peaceful and vast and silent. Just grass and sky and the weight of 800 years of history pressing down on one unmarked grave. You turn and walk back toward your tent. Behind you, the steppe continues as it always has, keeping its secrets, protecting its dead, and remembering everything. Sweet dreams.